November 10th, 1985. Bear Brook State Park, Allenstown, New Hampshire. A hunter walks through the woods like he does every year. The forest is quiet, cold, the kind of cold that settles in your chest and doesn't leave. He almost doesn't see it. A 55-gallon metal drum, half buried under dead leaves, just sitting there like it belongs. He gets closer. The smell hits him first. Inside the barrel, wrapped in black plastic, were two people. A woman and a child. Their names? Unknown. Their killer? Unknown. Their story? It would take 40 years, a revolution in science, and the obsession of investigators who refused to let them disappear, to finally give them back their names. This is the Bear Brook Murders, and it's not over yet. Allenstown is the kind of place you drive through without stopping. A small town in southern New Hampshire. Population, under 5,000. Quiet roads, old trees. The kind of place where nothing ever really happens. Until November 10th, 1985. A hunter stumbles upon a 55-gallon metal drum near the ruins of an old burned-down store, deep inside Bear Brook State Park. Police arrive. Inside the drum, the remains of a woman, estimated between 23 and 33 years old, and a young girl, between 8 and 10, both wrapped in black plastic, both killed by blunt force trauma. No ID, no missing persons match, no leads. They were buried in the local Allenstown cemetery. The tombstone read, "Here lies the mortal remains known only to God of a woman, aged 23 to 33, and a girl child aged 8 to 10. Their slain bodies were found on November 10th, 1985, in Bear Brook State Park. May their souls find peace in God's loving care. Known only to God. For years, that's all they were. Investigators ran through every database available. Nothing matched, no family came forward, no tips led anywhere. The case went cold, and the forest kept it secret for 15 more years. May 9th, 2000. A New Hampshire state trooper decides to revisit the original crime scene. He's thinking about the case, the woman, the girl. 2 sets of remains with no names, no answers. He walks the same trail, and then he stops. 300 feet from where the first barrel was found, barely the length of a football field, there is another drum. He opens it. 2 more girls, both young. Very young. One between 1 and 3 years old. The other approximately 2 to 4. They had been there the entire time. While investigators searched for 15 years, these 2 children lay in the cold ground. 300 feet away. 4 victims total. All female. All placed in that forest between 1977 and 1981. All unidentified. And whoever put them there had been free for nearly 2 decades. Here's what made this case different from most. The killer didn't just murder his victims. He made them disappear entirely. No names, no records, no history. He stripped them of their identities, the same way he stripped himself of his. His name was Terry Peter Rasmussen. But nobody knew that yet, because Terry Rasmussen didn't exist. Not really. He was Bob Evans. He was Curtis Kimball. He was Gordon Jensen. He was Robert Evans. He was at least 5 different people, living 5 different lives in 5 different states. He was born in Denver, Colorado in 1943. He married, had 4 children. And sometime around Christmas 1974, he simply vanished from his own family's life. His children would not hear from him again for decades. What he did in those years, we are still piecing together. What we know is this. Wherever Terry Rasmussen went, women disappeared. Single mothers mostly. women who were vulnerable, isolated, women looking for someone to love them. Forensic psychologist Dr. Rachel Tolles studied his pattern closely. His prime motive, she said, wasn't killing. It was control. He would love bomb his victims, overwhelming them with affection, isolating them from family and friends, moving them across states. And when they discovered who he really was, or when they tried to leave, he became lethal. He left a trail from New Hampshire to California, from Arizona to Oregon to Virginia, a ghost with different faces. And in 2000, with 4 unidentified bodies and 0 suspects, investigators had no idea who they were looking for. For decades, the Bear Brook case was a wall. Every lead exhausted, every database searched, every technique available used. And still, 4 nameless victims. A killer no one could identify. Then, in 2017, everything changed. A new science was emerging: genetic genealogy. The idea was simple and revolutionary. Take DNA from an unidentified person, upload it to public ancestry databases, and trace the family tree backward until you find a name. Volunteers began searching for the Bear Brook victims' DNA matches, and then a hit. DNA confirmed that one of the young girls was the biological daughter of whoever killed her, the father, the killer. A volunteer detective named Becky Heath spent years on this case, working late nights, cross-referencing names, building family trees with thousands of branches. She found him. Confirmed in 2017 through Y-DNA testing provided by one of his adult children. The man who called himself Bob Evans was Terry Peter Rasmussen. But Rasmussen had died in prison in 2010. He was serving 15 years to life for murdering his girlfriend, Yoon Jun, in California in 2002. A crime only discovered because a local pet store employee remembered him buying 10 25-pound bags of cat litter. He never answered for Bear Brook. He died thinking those 4 names would never be found. He was wrong. By 2019, 3 of the 4 victims finally had names. The woman in the first barrel, Marlise Elizabeth Honeychurch. She was last seen in California in November 1978, the day she introduced her family to her new boyfriend. His name was Terry Rasmussen. They never saw her again. Her daughters were with her. Marie Elizabeth Vaughn, approximately 9 years old. Sarah Lynn McWaters, approximately 2 years old. They had been in that forest for nearly 40 years, but one victim remained. Investigators called her the middle child, a little girl, approximately 3 years old, brown hair, a notable gap between her front teeth, 3 feet tall. She was Rasmussen's biological daughter. But who was her mother? In 2024, New Hampshire State Police partnered with the nonprofit DNA Doe Project. They built a family tree with over 25,000 names. They searched for years. And then, in the summer of 2025, a genealogist found a 2005 obituary. In it, a woman survived by her daughter, a daughter named Pepper Reed. They searched every database for Pepper Reed. No records after the 1970s. Nothing. Until they found a birth record. A baby girl, born 1976. Orange County, California. Her name, Rhea Rasmussen. Within 30 minutes of finding Pepper Reed's name, they found her daughters. On September 5th, 2025, 40 years after a hunter stumbled upon a metal drum in a New Hampshire forest, the middle child finally had her name back. Rhea Rasmussen. She was 3 years old when she died. She was killed by her own father. All 4 victims have names now, but the story isn't closed. Pepper Reed, Rhea's mother, was born in 1952 in Texas. She was last seen in the late 1970s. Investigators believe she, too, was one of Rasmussen's victims. Her body has never been found. Denise Boda, another woman who disappeared after meeting Rasmussen in Manchester, New Hampshire in 1981, has never been found. And there are others. Rasmussen traveled through at least 6 states over 11 years. He used at least 5 different names. And wherever he went, people disappeared. How many victims? We don't know. The New Hampshire Cold Case Unit is still asking for information about Rasmussen's movements between 1974 and 1985. Still asking, because somewhere, in some forest, in some barrel, or under some road or field, there may be more names waiting to be found. 4 children and a woman were forgotten for 4 decades. The man who took everything from them never faced justice for it. But they have their names back now. Marlise, Marie, Sarah, Rhea say their names.